It's not too often that you see an old-fashioned us versus them shootout anymore, even in the US. When they do happen, they tend to find a way into the history books, especially when they're this wild. Violence erupted between two rival motorcycle gangs on May 17, 2015 in Waco, Texas. But this wasn't pistols at dawn on Main Street. No, this one went down in the parking lot of a Twin Peaks. The backstory to the gunfight was a rally held by the members of the Bandidos OMG, which attracted bikers from all over Texas. Clearly, tensions flared. The Bandidos allegedly picked a fight with the rival gang, the Cossacks MC. Weapons got drawn, and, well, as Tom Needham, a district attorney in McLennan County, described it, it was nothing less than a battlefield situation.
The police knew they would show up, and it kicked off.
9 bikers were killed in the shootout, 4 at the hands of Waco police. Nearly 200 bikers were arrested. According to police spokesman Sergeant W. Patrick Swanton, in my nearly 35 years of law enforcement experience, this is the most violent and gruesome scene that I have dealt with. Needham described the aftermath to the Austin American-Statesman, revealing there were dozens of guns and hundreds of weapons collected after a 5-minute brawl. That made figuring out who to prosecute for the violence uniquely difficult. After the case dragged on for years, all but one person had their charges dropped, and the only trial ended in a hung jury. Unbelievably, no one was ever held accountable for the death and destruction.
Is the body of Patty Hearst among the 5 found early tonight in a shot-up, burned-out home on 54th and Compton Avenue?
It's hard to put in perspective how unbelievable that sounded today. Patty Hearst went from kidnapped heiress to the poster child for Stockholm Syndrome. During the 19 months the Symbionese Liberation Army held Patty Hearst, they were involved in many violent incidents, famously robbing banks with Hearst in tow, but none was more violent than the shootout that occurred on May 17, 1974. After the cops were tipped off to the SLA's Los Angeles safe house, 500 law enforcement agents descended and fired an estimated 5,000 rounds at the location. The 6 people inside the house returned fire with automatic weapons. By the end of the hour-long siege, 2 SLA members were dead from gunshot wounds, while the other 4 died when an exploding tear gas canister set the house on fire. Angela Atwood was one of the 6 victims. Her grieving father told the San Francisco Chronicle, the SLA's views did not license the barbaric methods used in eradicating those 6 lives. Patty Hearst's father, Randolph, was also furious about the bloodshed, but for a different reason. He believed that if police had taken the SLA alive, they wouldn't have been made martyrs, but would have been seen as dingbats. Patty Hearst was not among the dead. She would be arrested a bit over a year later and eventually convicted of bank robbery, among other charges. The horrific 1997 North Hollywood shootout was the result of a bank robbery gone wrong. It occurred in broad daylight outside a Bank of America with innocent bystanders present. Witness Nancy Swanson told CNN it was like the OK Corral.
They had magazines, assault weapons, body armor. They looked like they just came off a battlefield.
Firearms had advanced significantly over the previous century, and the 2 bank robbers were heavily armed. According to witness Bob McKibben, these guys were ready for war.
Uniformed police officers were outgunned. They don't have assault rifles, the suspects do.
The owner of a nearby gun store told CNN, the police came in a panic because their weapons weren't good enough to fight these people. These people had body armor, and they needed something that would break body armor. We supplied them with slugs that would at least break bones on someone wearing body armor. It's estimated that almost 2,000 rounds were fired that day. 8 civilians and 12 police officers were injured, while both perpetrators died. Shot 29 times, one of the robbers bled to death in the street while authorities did nothing to help him. The whole thing was broadcast live nationwide, as most of the 44-minute shootout was recorded by news helicopters. Speaking of the OK Corral,
I'm your huckleberry.
the gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona is the quintessential story of lawmen versus outlaws in the Wild West. It's perhaps the most infamous shootout in U.S. history. The gunfight happened on October 26, 1881. It was a culmination of long-standing bad blood between members of the Clanton-McLaury gang, known as the Cowboys, and the town marshal, Virgil Earp, his brothers Wyatt and Morgan, and Doc Holliday. The lawmen confronted 5 of the Cowboys outside the OK Corral. It's not known who fired first, but there is this little tidbit tied to the event.
One eyewitness did hear probably Morgan say to Doc, "Let them have it."
The thing most shocking about it today is that the whole gunfight lasted just 30 seconds. It left 3 Cowboys dead and 3 lawmen wounded. At the time, this level of violence was nothing short of shocking, even for the Wild West. The following day, the Tombstone Nugget wrote up a poetic description of the incident, calling it one of the crimson days in the annals of Tombstone, a day when blood flowed as water, a day always to be remembered as witnessing the bloodiest and deadliest street fight that has ever occurred in this place, or probably in the territory. The writer might be surprised to learn that today, the spot where it happened is a tourist attraction. He'd probably also be shocked to learn that they named it after the building next to the Shootouts, not where it actually happened. But then again, the gunfight at C.S. Fly's photography gallery doesn't really roll off the tongue. On May 19, 1920, 13 detectives from the Baldwin Felts Agency were evicting Union mining families from their homes in Matewan, West Virginia. As word spread, fellow miners showed up angry and armed with the help of sympathetic Matewan Police Chief Sid Hatfield. In a 1989 interview, now in the West Virginia State Archives, Dixie Accord, who was a child living in Matewan at the time, said her grandmother sent her home as things began to heat up.
I had walked up the railroad and had put my foot on the first step when there's 1,000 shots fired.
It's unclear which side started firing first, but the brief but violent shootout left 10 people dead. It also led to the largest armed labor uprising in U.S. history, the Battle of Blair Mountain. Accord shared, "I will never forget it for as long as I live, all those shots being fired. It just seemed like the end of the world to me." Just before midnight on April 5, 1970, 2 California Highway Patrol officers pulled over a car containing 2 men who were reported to be brandishing a gun.
They had backup coming probably less than a minute away. They chose not to wait for the backup.
That would prove to be a fatal mistake. As soon as the car stopped, things went badly wrong. While the driver, Bobby Davis, initially seemed to be compliant, his passenger, Jack Twining, shot one of the officers in the chest, killing him instantly. Then Davis shot the other officer dead. Moments later, 2 additional CHP officers arrived to provide backup. They too were shot by Davis and Twining. When a third pair of officers arrived and returned fire, Davis and Twining fled, setting off a 9-hour manhunt. Twining ran to a nearby house where he took a hostage. The resulting standoff ended when he died by suicide as a home filled with tear gas and police stormed inside. Davis was apprehended and sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences. Now known as the Newhall incident, it was at that time the deadliest day for police in California history. In 2008, Santa Clarita Mayor Bob Keller spoke to the local outlet The Signal, recalling, "It hit everybody like a freight train. It changed law enforcement across the country."
He taught from the Old Testament. He thought he was Jesus. Of course, he thinks he's Jesus because he has a mental illness.
That's a prelude that the Memphis police wish they knew before arriving at the home of Lindbergh Sanders in 1983 after he claimed to have information about some purse snatchings. Things went south rather quickly. Sanders and 6 members of his Black Jesus cult took Officer Robert Hester hostage while his partner managed to flee. This led to a 30-hour standoff lasting from January 11th to January 13th, culminating in a shootout when police breached the building. Sanders and the 6 cult members were killed, and the captive police officer's body was discovered beaten to death. The actions of the police officers during the Shannon Street massacre were controversial, both for their failure to enter the home earlier and for the deaths of all 7 residents. People felt that everyone in that house didn't decide to kill that officer.
As a result, some people who just by being in the wrong place shouldn't have been killed, shot.
Also known as Bloody Sunday, the 1916 Everett massacre occurred when striking members of the industrial workers of the world decided to exercise their constitutional right to speak in public. I feel like we sort of need to give a bit more context here. This was early in the socialist movement, and the IWW, or Wobblies as they were known, were seen at the time as a far-left outfit and full of anarchists. On November 5th, 260 IWW members sailed from Seattle to Everett and attempted to dock, but they were met by 200 vigilantes ready to use violence to keep those anarchists out of their town. Nobody knows who fired the first shots, although the vigilantes were certainly more heavily armed. Most of the shots came from their side, and some of the vigilante casualties were probably due to friendly fire. Several Wobblies were shot and killed, while others drowned when the boat almost capsized. In total, at least 7 people died, and as many as 47 people were injured during the 10-minute shootout. Seattle Mayor Hiram Gill was appalled, telling the Seattle Union Record, "These cowards in Everett who, without right or justification, shot into the crowd on the boat were the murderers and not the IWWs. They outnumbered the IWWs 5-1, and in spite of this, they stood there on the dock and fired into the boat, IWWs innocent passengers and all." The 1934 Battle of Barrington occurred when Sam Cowley and Ed Hollis, FBI agents tasked with fighting the mob, caught up to a car carrying Lester Gillis, better known as Babyface Nelson. He was in a vehicle with his wife and a fellow gangster who clearly didn't want to get caught. The cars were about 150 feet apart as the shootout ensued.
We saw babyface Nelson standing up on the highway with his machine guns firing.
Juliet Fitzsimmons, Nelson's sister, spoke to his widow Helen and relayed her comments to the New York Times, saying, "The federal men's fire disabled our automobile. I could almost feel the bullets as they whistled past my face. Les hollered at me to duck, and I jumped into a ditch and kept my head down. I could see Les firing back at the federal men who were trying to kill him." The gunfight lasted 5 minutes, and by the end, both agents were dead. The gangster's car sped away with its 3 occupants still alive, but Nelson had been mortally wounded. He died within hours, and his body was discovered in a ditch.
El Fuego Paca.
The 1884 Frisco shootout was the most lopsided in Wild West history. It involved a single lawman, 19-year-old El Fuego Baca, pinned down in a house by 80 cowboys. According to HistoryNet, Baca is alleged to have said, "I will show the Texans there is at least one Mexican in the county who is not afraid of an American cowboy."
If we get in their way, they will shoot us down. We are Americans, same as they are.
The cowboys were mad that Baca had arrested a white man for bullying Hispanic citizens. So over the course of 3 days, they formed a lynch mob and fired 4,000 rounds into the house Baca was hiding out in.
4,000 bullets. That's a lot of lead, isn't it?
Baca returned fire with his 6-shooter and even found time to cook some food. Despite his seemingly desperate position, not only did he survive unscathed, but he also killed 4 of the cowboys and injured 8 more. While he was arrested, he was acquitted at trial and went on to have an incredibly colorful career in and out of law enforcement. In a 1936 interview with the Federal Writers Project, he explained, "I never wanted to kill anybody, but if a man had it in his mind to kill me, I made it my business to get him first. In those days, I was a self-made deputy. I had a badge I made for myself, and if they didn't believe I was a deputy, they'd better believe it because I made them believe it."